city of Durango. Karen gave the city of Durango its very first Parks bear-proof containers.
Oh my gosh.
Donated one. It got the ball rolling.
That's amazing.
I tell you what, Sundia, what I'll do is I'll answer this question just to occupy the next few minutes. It'll only take me a minute.
Yeah, that's perfect.
But
fire away.
Yeah, Jane asked a question about black bear behavior being different in geographic regions. For example, she specifically mentioned the Great Smoky Mountain area. Black bears are black bears are black bears. They generally behave the same way. Understand that there might be differences, like a bear that is used to being around an urban area or a city might behave differently than a truly wild animal, but they're all the same bear. The behaviors are very, very similar. The circumstances might be different. The one thing, and I'm wondering whether or not Jane is implying here, because I have heard it about 1,000 times, is people will tell me, oh, black bears don't hibernate in the Smokies. And that's not true. Black bears will hibernate, or they'll have this downtime no matter where they're at. Even in Louisiana, Florida, they'll have a downtime. It's a different kind of hibernation. It's called torpor, but they all behave similarly. There's just subtle differences between geographic regions. For example, length of hibernation would be one of them. So hopefully I answered that question. Her other question is about what do you do when you encounter a bear on a narrow trail? And I'm not going to answer that until later because I think this presentation is going to answer that question.
Great, thanks, Daryl.
You had bears going into torpor. I know you and I have had this conversation a bunch of times about, is it hibernation? Is it torpor? Do you want to just briefly describe that?
Yeah, because people keep telling me black bears in certain areas don't hibernate. Hibernation, the definition of hibernation is a period of torpidity or dormancy during a certain period of time. And that word torpidity comes from torpor. And so torpor is more or less the way that bears hibernate. So yes, bears hibernate. The way bears do it is a little bit different than many other hibernators. Some hibernators are called true hibernators, in which not only their heart rate and their respiration decline, but their body temperature decreases to just above freezing. Bears don't do that. Bears' body temperature declines, but not as drastically, so they can wake up quicker. And so again, they're still in hibernation. It's a lighter form. In fact, some people say that they're super hibernators as opposed to true hibernators. So they still hibernate, they just do things a little bit differently, but throughout the wintertime, there's going to be a downtime. Remember that dormancy is not really based on the cold, it's based on the shortage of resources. And so even in the deep south, you don't have those growing seasons where there's a lot of food. Leaves fall off trees, there's not a lot of food out there. So most bears throughout North America will experience that short period of dormancy or hibernation during the wintertime.
Thanks, Daryl. And maybe we can mention for those that just signed on, if you can type into the chat where you're viewing this from, that would be great. And Daryl, Jane is on here.
Oh, hey, Jane. I answered the questions that you emailed in. I will go over them again towards the end in case you missed it. I didn't see when you hopped on.
Yeah, it's just now. So.
Okay. Just real quickly, Jane, in case you have to run, bears pretty much behave similarly, and it doesn't matter what part of the country they're in. There might be subtle differences, but you'll get subtle differences between like a bear that lives deep in the national park versus one that lives next to the city of Gatlinburg. And so behaviorally, black bears are black bears are black bears no matter where they're at.
Hey folks, here's a little pro tip for the chat. If you would like everyone to see your chat, please click panelists and attendees. Most of you are just sending us your location to the panelists, but I'm sure other people would be curious too. So you do that by going into the chat. There's a little blue bar where it says panelists. Click that little down arrow and you can click on panelist and attendees, and then everyone will be able to see your message. Have any tech support needs, feel free to chat with me or chat with just panelists and we can help you out.
And hi, Todd Johnson. Hope you're having a good time up at Silverton.
We'll have about an hour-long presentation here in just a moment by Daryl, and then a 30-minute Q&A at the end. So during the presentation, feel free to type your Q&A questions into the Q&A, which is located along the bottom of your Zoom screen. Those questions might get lost in the chat. There's a lot of chatter, so make sure if you want a question answered during Q&A to ask those in the Q&A feature. And we are recording this meeting. I think with that, we are probably ready to get started. I'll hand it over to Brian Peterson, the Executive Director of Bear Smart Durango.
Cool, thanks, Andia. I'll need to leave the screen. There we go. All right, well, I'm Brian Peterson. I'm the director of Bear Smart Durango. We work to reduce human-bear conflict in the greater Durango area. Just wanted to thank everybody for showing up, and I'm glad you got a chance to catch this. We're so excited to have our guest speaker, Daryl, here. He's one of my favorite bear people, and it's an honor to have him. Big thanks to Sandia with Sagebrush Limited for helping us out on this, and the Durango Herald for sponsoring this series. This is the first of 5. There'll be weekly presentations. So a big shout out to the Herald for helping out with that. I don't want to take up a whole lot of time. I've got a brief bio of our speaker. Daryl Ratajczak grew up in New York State and received his Bachelor of Science degree in Wildlife Management from the State University of New York College of Environmental Science and Forestry. That's a long sentence, Daryl.
It's the world's longest, just so you know.
Okay. A career wildlife biologist, his resume includes working for the Appalachian Bear Rescue outside of Great Smoky Mountains National Park, which is a great nonprofit. If you have any money that you can send their way, they do great work. He was the big game program coordinator for Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency and was the chief of wildlife and forestry for the state of Tennessee. He now resides in Utah. Daryl is an accomplished writer and teacher and founded Wildlife for You, which offers wildlife courses, webinars, and podcasts, all about the wildlife they and you are passionate about. You can learn more about this at wildlifeforyou.com. So thanks again, Daryl. This is great. Always a pleasure to be able to listen to you. So take it away.
All right, I appreciate that introduction, Brian. And so what I'm going to do, I'm going to share my screen, and someone give me a heads up whether or not you can see my slide okay?
Yep.
All right. Well, thank you again for the introduction. I plan on being your teacher for the next hour or so, hour and a half. I'm happy to stick around as long as you want. But what I wanted to do today is give one of my favorite talks about bears, and it's called The Language of Bears. And what it is meant to do is to give people an understanding about bear behavior so they are better prepared for an encounter with a bear. Now, I'm not going to go into much detail. Everyone knows we've had some serious situations with bears, even black bears, this year alone. Obviously, we had one near Durango in which we had a severe, we had a fatality, as a matter of fact. And so this usually causes a lot of people to get a little bit nervous about going out in bear country. And one of the things that I was telling Brian earlier is it irks me when someone goes on social media and they ask a simple question about, well, what do I do if I see a bear or encounter a bear? And so many people on social media will immediately write them off, say, oh, don't worry about it, the bear's going to run, or don't worry about it, you won't encounter. And I liken it to someone asking a serious question about, I have a serious fear of heights, what do I do? And someone says, oh, don't worry about the ledge, you're not going to fall off. That does absolutely nothing to help someone in that situation. So what my talk is geared to do is to give you not only knowledge about bears and bear behavior, but it will actually boost your confidence. I'm not kidding you, folks. Folks that have sat through this class, learned about bears, and then went on to have some encounters where they've seen bears, they have written me back and said, oh my gosh, it was such a wonderful feeling knowing what was going on with that bear and what I was supposed to do. So what I want you to do is kind of sit back, relax, enjoy the show, kind of think of questions for the end. But what I want to do is explain everything that I know about bears, and hopefully that'll translate well to you understanding more about bears and make your outdoor experience that much better. So I'm not going to go into my background. Brian did a great job, but I've worked with bears for a long, long time, both individual bears and managing populations of bears. Been doing it for over 25 years, so I've got plenty of experience. So just wanted to assure you that what I'm going to give you is pretty much science-based information. So I'm going to start this talk with a simple question of, why is it so important to know what animals are saying? Well, I imagine most people on this talk today will go for a hike, whether or not it's in a wilderness area or maybe even a park just outside of your house, somewhere where there's nature you can enjoy. And when you go for that walk out in nature, I can almost assure you, everyone here, we've had a situation where some bird was not happy and they were squawking at us. Or undoubtedly, there's been a situation where maybe a squirrel was chattering just incessantly, just nonstop, barking at you. Those animals you tend not to pay too much attention to. It's a bird, it's a squirrel. Who really cares about that? But then as that animal gets bigger, you might have some type of ground squirrel or a marmot or something like that. Or even more so, you might have a coyote who begins yipping at you or howling at you. Your ears begin to perk up a little bit as that animal grows in size. So my thought here is, if you're walking out there and you out in nature and you turn the corner, you could be walking down your driveway and you turn the corner and there's a bear who is saying something to you. Wouldn't it be wise to know what that bear is trying to say to you if he's trying to get your attention? And so that's why I put this talk together. That's one of the main reasons, because I think it's really important for us to understand what bears are trying to say to us. Here is another reason, and this is probably more important. If you look at the world today, let's take a look at populations within the last 50 years, just a snapshot in time, but within the last 50 years, if we look at the human population, it's a no-brainer. Everyone knows what the human population has done over the last 50 years. It's increased. Human populations have been going up forever, literally. But how about bear populations over the last 50 years? Now, I will tell you, whenever I ask this question in person, most people in the audience will say bear populations are going down. Well, folks, that is not correct. If you look at bear populations, especially in North America, bear populations have been on the rise. In some areas, they have been on an exponential rise, especially black bears. Black bears on the East Coast their populations have been growing tremendously within the last 50 years. That's because when the Europeans first came here, we didn't tolerate many predators and we wiped them out. But with all the wildlife laws that we instituted, many of those populations are rebounding, and bear populations have been increasing tremendously, especially on the East Coast within the last 50 years. And so what does that do? You have human populations increasing, bear populations increasing. Literally what this does to us is we have two worlds out there. We have a human world and we have this bear world. And unfortunately, with growing populations, those worlds are colliding. And so this talk isn't really meant to ask the question about, should we learn to live together? It's more or less telling you we have to learn to live together, because we have these two worlds, these two populations that are growing, and we're not getting any more room to spread out. So we're going to have to learn to live together. I will tell you a little secret, and this is my little thing, because I tell this to everyone. When it comes to me personally, I like people, but I love bears. And I give this talk not just for the benefit of people, but I do this for the benefit of the bears, because usually when bears and people get together, it's the bear that ends up the loser in most situations. So anyway, that's one of the reasons why I put this talk. I've been giving this talk for a number of years now. And like I said, I hope it teaches you a little bit about this world in which we live, and this world in which we live with bears. So to get started here, this talk is going to be about the language of bears. And so the question right off the bat is, do bears really talk? And so I'm going to put a picture up here that you might recognize, that obviously is a picture of a dog. It is a collie, but if I'm trying to get you to picture what collie that is. So let me change the coloration and make it an old-timey photo. And right away, some people, I hope some people out in the audience will say, oh my gosh, that's Lassie. Now, if you don't know who Lassie is, hopefully some of you do, but Lassie was probably the world's smartest dog. It was a television show in the 60s and 70s, I think mostly in the 60s, but that tells you how old I am. But here's the thing, what Lassie would do, Lassie lived with her master, Timmy. And so Lassie would come into the house, finding Timmy's mom and dad, roll over, bark a couple of times, do a couple of flips, and all of a sudden they'd say, oh my gosh, Timmy fell down a well. Is like they knew, obviously that wasn't true as far as her being able to speak, but everyone understands that dogs are really smart animals. They can't speak our language and tell us that Timmy fell down the well, but they try to communicate when something's going on in their life. And so just using that example, we all know dogs are really smart. I've got two awesome dogs that are just brilliant. They understand when I give them sentences, they know to back up or get in the car or do whatever. So we know dogs are smart. Now, if we were to look on the spectrum of animals as far as animal intelligence, dogs are on an end. They're on the high end, but on the highest end, we have the great apes, chimpanzees, orangutans, gorillas. We all know those are among the most smartest animals outside of humans or past humans. And so they're brilliant in the animal world. So where do bears fall? Well, believe it or not, bears fall kind of in between the dogs and the apes. So they're smarter than dogs, and we all know how smart dogs are. Not as smart as apes, but needless to say, this tells us bears are pretty smart animal. And if dogs try to communicate with us, there's no reason bears would not try to communicate with us. And so our talk today is trying to figure out what they're trying to say to us whenever we do have an encounter. Now, what I'm going to do, and I hope there's not a big sigh because you're not in school or you're not in class, but I do want to teach you a bit about black bear biology and behavior, because the more you know about their biology and their behavior, the more you're going to understand what they're trying to say to you. And so some of this will be basic, some of it's kind of entertaining, and some of them, I hope you'll learn something like, oh, I never knew that before. So this talk today, not talking about brown bears, also known as grizzlies. We're talking specifically about black bears. Now, right off the bat, black bears aren't always black. They have these color phases. Now, I will tell you, for the most part, most black bears are black, especially in the east. Like 99% of the bears in the east are black. They sometimes have a white chest blaze. But the further west you go, after you cross that Mississippi River, you start getting into some other color phases. And it's really important. I'm not going to go into telling the difference between a black bear and a brown bear or a grizzly, but it's really important to know what species of bear you're looking at, because although bears will behave similarly, they have different tipping points. Grizzlies tend not to be as afraid of us, and so completely different set of circumstances with grizzlies. So that will be another class you can attend from me. So today we're just talking about black bears, but you got to be able to recognize them. So black bears definitely are black. There's actually some bears out there that are more brownish. A lot of people will see a brown looking bear and think it's a grizzly, but this is actually a black bear. Some of the bears out there, black bears, will even be blonde. I know in New Mexico, I've seen a number of blonde black bears. Again, they have a grizzly look to them color-wise, but facial features tell us it's a black bear. One of my favorites are the cinnamon colored bear, which is a reddish color. And then, believe it or not, and this is why I think black bears are some of the most fascinating animals, they come in such a variety of colors. There's even a white black bear. And now this is not an albino. This is what is called a spirit bear or a Kermode bear. They're found on Kermode Islands just near Vancouver in British Columbia. Again, not albino. They just have a white fur to them. Also, and this is probably my favorite, are these are found on the southeastern portion of Alaska. They're called glacial bears, and they literally have this grayish bluish tinge to them. Certain sunlight, they'll actually look blue. So black bears come in all different colors. You got to be able to recognize what kind of bear you're dealing with. Everything we talk about today, behavior-wise and biology-wise, is about black bears. So let's get into some of the biology and the characteristics of black bears. Again, this becomes really important with understanding what they're trying to say to you. So typically, black bears are not as big as people think. Now, mature males, they can get pretty big, anywhere from 250 to 400. That's on average. Females are smaller, generally 150 pounds to 200 pounds. And so right away, you say their size isn't that big. I imagine there's a number of folks on our talk tonight that are bigger than a mature female black bear. And so this is one of the reasons that affects their behavior. A human is a formidable opponent to a black bear. Now, I understand that in some places, especially if the bear has access to human provided foods, black bears can get to be 500, 600, sometimes even 700 pounds. But that's a rarity. Typically in the wild, that does not happen. That's usually when they have access to foods they normally shouldn't be eating. So the bears are not as big. Now, having said that, I will tell you, I've worked for a number of state and federal agencies, as well as a nonprofit dealing with bears. And I would receive a ton of phone calls about concerned citizens calling about a bear in their yard. And typically what we do is whenever people would call me, I would ask them how big the bear was, and I would divide by 2, and that would get me close. But I got to tell you one story. When I was working at that Appalachian Bear Rescue, it used to be the Appalachian Bear Center, and that was just outside of Great Smoky Mountain National Park. A woman had called me because this bear had come in to her bird feeder, and it was rather small, and she was worried about it health-wise. She called me up and she told me it looked really skinny. In fact, she described it as it was about the size of her German Shepherd, but she was worried about it because she could literally see the rib cage. It was just so skinny and gaunt. And I asked her, I said, ma'am, just trying to get a feel for how big this bear is, can you tell me how much it weighs? And she says, gosh, it can't be any more than 300 pounds. I don't know how many 300-pound German Shepherds there are out there, but I tell you what, folks, people see bears and they automatically inflate those numbers. Don't know why it is, but the bears appear larger than life to most people. So anyway, black bears typically are not as big as one would think, especially you throw a bucket of water on them, mat down that fur, and they're actually pretty skinny many times. Now I put up there, excuse me, the home range, and this is highly variable. It says 60 to 150 square miles. You could have a bear that has a home range of 20 square miles. A lot of that depends on the food availability, what resources are within that range of the bear. So obviously, the less food resources available, the more they're going to wander, the bigger their home range. But that tells you what kind of animals they are. They are what we call these opportunistic omnivores. It means they eat anything. So a lot of people think bears are carnivores. Bears are actually omnivores, meaning they will eat meat, but they also eat a lot of vegetation. And here's the thing, folks, vegetation makes up the vast majority of their diet. And the meat that they do eat, especially the black bears, it's mostly going to be carrion. It's going to be scavenged carcasses that they find. It'll be insect life. Very rarely do they actually kill an animal. Don't get me wrong, if they're walking through the field, when I said they're opportunistic, they eat the easiest thing they find. And so they don't wake up one day and say, I'm in the mood to eat a deer, I'm going to go hunt a deer. They don't do that. If they're walking and they stumble upon a deer fawn, they might take it down. Odds are they're not going to stumble upon that deer fawn, but they might stumble upon a carcass somewhere. And so the vast majority of their diet is going to be vegetation. They love, and I'm going to use a geeky, nerdy term called mast. Mast is more or less the fruit crop. So in the summertime, you have soft mast, which is blackberries, blueberries, service berries, any kind of berry that ripens in the summertime. That is called soft mast. Excuse me. And then in the winter or in the fall, their diet switches to what is called hard mast, or the nut crop. So in the east, you got a lot of bears eating acorns and hickory nuts. In the west, you have pinyon nuts. You got a lot of pine nuts. And so mast, or the fruit crop, is a big part of their diet. Now, one of the things that dictates bears' behavior is the fact that bears hibernate. And I started talking about this a little bit before we got started. I don't know if people logged in early, but black bears all over North America hibernate. Hibernation is just this downtime, this dormancy where they're not eating or drinking much. They spend most of their time sleeping. They use this biological term called torpor. It's a slowing down of their metabolism. But what they do is they spend anywhere from a few weeks in the more southern latitudes to 4 or 5 months in the northern latitudes where they're not eating. That means they wake up from hibernation hungry. They are driven to eat, because during that hibernation, sometimes they lose as much as 30% of their body weight. And so they wake up in the springtime and they're famished. They're looking for food. They're starved for calories. This is going to play big time into their behaviors. Excuse me. I'm at my dad's house, and the dog situation is getting me a little bit. So in the summertime, they kind of relax. You get the berry crop coming in, so they got plenty of food around. But then as the fall rolls around and they got to prepare for hibernation again, they enter this biological phase called hyperphagia. It literally translates from the Greek as feeding frenzy. So they are going to go nuts trying to get as many calories as possible. So whether or not it's springtime or fall time, they are hungry. They're looking for food. They're driven by this need to eat. And so that dictates a lot of their behavior. Now, how do they find their food? Well, bears have some amazing senses. Now, at least 2 of their senses are pretty amazing. One is super amazing. Their sight, maybe not as amazing as some other animals like the birds of prey, where they have this telescopic vision. Bear eyesight is very similar to humans. So you know how well we see. That's about how well a bear sees. But this is where they start separating themselves. Their hearing is excellent. They can hear things far and above anything that a human can hear. But what really separates the bears is their sense of smell. It's literally unequaled in the mammal kingdom, or the mammal kingdom, in the mammal world. And I once wrote an article called The Nose, the Glorious Nose, just trying to describe how insanely awesome a bear's nose is. Obviously, this is a brown bear nose, but even morphologically, their their skeleton, their skull has these huge openings, these nares that allows all this nasal membrane to be lined with these olfactory or these smell receptors. And so bears can smell better than literally any mammal out there. And to give you an idea what I'm talking about, let me talk about 3 animals, or 3 species in particular. A human. We're all humans here, and we kind of know what we can smell. We can smell roses, we can smell dinner cooking. We know what we can smell. Now, when we start talking about dogs or members of the canine family, dogs have a nose far beyond anything. If you own a dog and you take your dog for a walk, he finds a bush or a hydrant and he's just obsessed with it because he smells something on it. We can't even begin to comprehend what he's smelling, but we know their sense of smell is far beyond ours. Well, believe it or not, they've done some studies where they're literally counting or calculating how many smell receptors, those olfactory receptors, that a dog has. Now, the typical dog, the Lassie kind of dog, usually has about 100 times more smell receptors than a human. So it's reasonable to believe they can smell 100 times better than us. Now, if anyone knows which breed of dog has the best nose, it is the bloodhound. And those studies show that the bloodhound typically has about 300 times more smell receptors than a human. So they can smell about 300 times better than us. This is where it gets awesome, because we're going to talk about a bear. Believe it or not, folks, bears have about 7 times more smell receptors than any bloodhound. So if you do the math, the 300 times 7, that's over 2,000 times more receptors than a human. They can smell 2,000 times better than us. Now, if you're anything like me, you're probably thinking, that sounds awesome, but I have no idea what that means. So don't worry, because I didn't either. But I put together this analogy to hopefully give you a better understanding of what this means. And so this analogy is called smell the beans. So the first group we're going to talk about is the human. So say you go to the store and you buy a can of beans. As a human, we come home, we open up that can of beans, we pour it out into a pot, and as those beans begin to cook, we can smell them. That is the human sense of smell. The dog, on the other hand, especially the bloodhound, you hold up that can, and that bloodhound can actually smell some beans from that can, whether or not it's some of the juice that might have been on the outside of the paper or whatever. The bloodhound can detect a bean smell emanating from that can. The bear, on the other hand, the bear can smell the perfume that was on the lady who put the beans in the can 2 weeks earlier. And once again, if you're like me, it's you're mind blown. Because if you think about it, that bear, its mind has to be blown. If they can smell all that, its brain can't process, it's sensory overload. How can a bear even function if it smells that well? And so came up with another analogy to explain kind of what's going on in this bear's world. So I don't know if anyone has ever been here. This is a Chuck E. Cheese. This is a kid's greatest dream because it's a pizza place, but it has video games galore, arcade games. If you've never been to a Chuck E. Cheese, just picture walking into a bowling alley, a jam-packed bowling alley, or an arcade that is just mobbed. So you walk in that front door of this Chuck E. Cheese, and as soon as you walk in, your ears are going to hear bells and sirens and kids screaming and people talking and whistles and just so many auditory stimuli that your ears are just bombarded with all these different sounds. So you walk in, you go up to the counter, you order your pizza, and you sit down with whatever your friend or family that you went with, and you're sitting there in the booth and all these sounds are going off. Your ears are hearing all these sounds at once, simultaneously. But then over the loudspeaker, you hear, Daryl, your pizza is ready. And right away, you're like, oh, I got to get my pizza. How did you do that? You had 1,000 different sounds. How did you focus on one of them? And so that's the best way I can describe what's going on in a bear's mind. So in the morning, say a black bear wakes up. He wakes up, he's hungry, he wants to find something to eat. And so I promise you folks, that bear can smell the honey that is dripping out of the beehive high up in the oak tree. Guaranteed he smells that. I can also guarantee he can detect some of those blackberries that are ripening on the bush just down the road. And there's probably a really good chance he can even smell those grubs that are just coming up from underneath that rotten log down by the stream. But then there's something else he picks up with his nose. He picks up that smell of hot dogs and hamburgers and sausages cooking on a grill. He can smell all this stuff. His nose is that powerful. Which one there, just like the pizza where they called my name, which one there do you think, if a bear is starving for calories and wants to get the most bang for his buck, which one do you think he would rather go for? It's going to be those bad foods, those human provided foods. They know that kind of food is really bad, which is really good for them because it packs on pounds. And this is what drives so many bears. And I could talk about Durango, I could talk about Gatlinburg, I could talk about any town USA where there are human smells of garbage or restaurants or just people picnicking and having cookouts on their grill. It's a huge temptation for these bears. And so that's why they come into the towns. And when they're given free access to trash or some of these other human provided foods, it's such a bad situation. So that's why it is so very important to always make sure that trash is secured. But this is what drives bears. They're looking for that easy, high calorie meal, and their nose drives them. Because their nose brings them into human dominated worlds, we're going to have encounters. And so I will tell you, okay, that's enough about the biology of the bear. So let's talk about their behavior. Like I said, their behavior is pretty much driven by their stomach. They're trying to find food. Now, naturally, again, a bear living in the wild, he's going to find lots to eat. He's going to be eating a lot of vegetation like that bear there. They will be tempted if they smell those human provided foods from a campground where there's hot dogs cooking. They will be tempted. Sometimes they get nefarious and they really start approaching humans. That's actually a sad picture. That was actually a picture that was taken off a gentleman's camera from New Jersey that he unfortunately was attacked from. But bears can sometimes be drawn closer and closer to people because of that drive to find something to eat. Now, you have to understand, again, there's lots of people out there. There are lots of bears out there. There are going to be bear encounters. The good thing that I will tell you about bears are born wild. They don't like humans. They don't want to be around humans. I think the best way to show you, I loved this picture when I saw it. A good friend of mine took this picture. But look at that cup. Does this look like a bear that wants to be around people? He's just getting freaked out because he knows this photographer is taking a picture of him. So for the most part, bears want nothing to do with humans, but it's their stomach that's driving them. So let's talk about bear encounters and how bears will try to communicate with us whenever we do have an encounter. I told you they're highly intelligent, and I'm keeping track of time here. They're highly intelligent and they're going to try to communicate with us. And so they're going to use different ways of communication, whether or not it's vocalizations or body posture, in order to speak with us and tell us what's going on with them. So the first thing we're going to talk about are these close encounters. And the first thing I have to do is describe what an encounter is. Now, an encounter with a bear is not you going for a hike, and while you're walking along the ridge, you see a bear down in the valley 300 yards off feeding on some blackberries, and you watch that bear go about his business. That is not an encounter. An encounter is when you are close enough to a bear that you affect their behavior and they affect your behavior. That's the proximity you have to be in, that you're close enough to notice each other and to behave differently. That is what we are defining by encounters. Now, this whole talk is going to be based on trying to figure out what kind of encounter you're having. And there's two basic types, and it's really easy. We want to break this down as simple as possible. First off, there is a defensive encounter with a bear, and there is an offensive encounter with a bear. Defensive encounter, let's talk about the defensive encounter first. So say you have a human and a bear, and you are close enough that you are going to interact with each other. In a defensive encounter, the idea of that bear is to increase the distance. They want to get away from you. They don't want to be close to you or any other human. They want that distance between you and them to increase. That is a defensive encounter. An offensive encounter is the complete opposite. What they do is they want to close the distance. They want to get closer to you. So that is the difference between a defensive encounter and an offensive encounter. And so I'll go into much more detail. I've got some videos here as well. But understand, in an offensive encounter, a bear is primarily looking for food. And I think the best way to understand this is if you ever watched any of those nature programs where you see a cheetah or some other cat that's hunting for its food and it's lying in wait in the bushes, is that cat growling and hissing and saying, hey, I'm over here, as it's trying to find food? They're quiet. They don't make noise when they're looking for food. In a defensive situation, that animal doesn't care about food. That animal is upset for some other reason. And so they're going to be blowy and blustery. Now, I'll explain it in more detail. So let's first start talking about this defensive situation or a defensive encounter with a bear. I will tell you that the vast, vast majority of encounters you have with a bear where he sees you or you see him or vice versa. Obviously, I always say he, but there's girl bears out there too. But in a defensive encounter, you're interacting with each other. And here's the thing. There's different reasons that we would have a defensive encounter. You could surprise a bear at close range. If you're walking down the trail and it's really dense vegetation, you can turn the trail and suddenly there's a bear 10 feet away from you. It's a surprise encounter. Now, keep in mind, this does not have to happen in the backcountry. This could happen at the end of your driveway as you're taking the trash out and you turn the corner around your car and there's a bear there. And so these close surprise encounters is one form of defensive encounter. Another one, and this is a big one, and we'll probably talk about it later, but whenever you're walking a dog, the dogs, they can agitate a bear, and a bear is going to react defensively because they see dogs as this predator after them. Obviously, a barking dog could be a scary thing for a black bear, and so they're going to react defensively. Another situation is if you encounter a bear that is on a food source. It could be a carcass like in that picture. It could be a blackberry, blueberry field. It could be a trash can. But there's some type of food source that the bear is going to be defensive about. He wants, that's his food, and he's going to defend that area. Occasionally, this doesn't happen much, but black bear mating season is usually early summer, so June, July, sometime around there. Bears will mate. If you get in between a male and a female bear during the mating season, a bear can react defensively. But the one that everyone knows and understands is you don't get in between a mama and her cubs. All of these situations here, whether or not it's a surprise encounter, a food cache, you have dogs with you, mating season, or the mother with cubs, they are going to be defending something. They're going to be defending their offspring. They're going to be defending their food. They are going to react in a specific way in most situations. Now, I will tell you, everything I tell you, this is what they do almost every time. I will tell you right here, right now, it's not 100%. You're always going to have that situation that surprises you, so you can never drop your guard. But the more and more you deal with bears, the more and more you see bears, the more predictable they become, but you never, ever relax around them. So in this defensive situation, remember that bear's intention is to increase the distance. Because that's the case, guess what, folks? Bears are going to put on a show. They're gonna try to tell you, get out of my space. I don't like you around. You're too close to my cubs. You're too close to my food. They're going to try to tell you to get out of his area, his or her area. So they are going to react, and they're going to be big and blustery. They want to send the message to you. So what do? They have specific behaviors. For example, when you first encounter the bear, he might not be he's getting upset. He or she's getting upset, getting a little nervous. You're too close. You're getting too close to this or that, or to them individually. And so one of the first things it might do is pop their jaws. It's called jaw popping. And what they'll do is they'll take their lips and they'll smack their lips back and forth together real fast. And you could hear it. You could hear their lips smacking. That's called jaw popping. Another behavior is what we call huffing. And what the bear will do, it will exhale very quickly and very loudly that you can actually hear it. You'll hear, that's them telling you they're upset or they're nervous. Another one that occasionally a bear will moan. I am not going to demonstrate moaning, but picture Chewbacca and how Chewbacca kind of moans. It kind of sounds a little bit like that. It's a little more tonal and maybe shorter than Chewbacca. But the one I love the most is bears will lose control of their facial expressions. They'll either yawn. And can you imagine being around a bear? You have a crowd of people and there's a big bear there and all of a sudden it yawns. What do you think most people are going to think? Oh, the bear's tired. The bear's not tired. The bear is upset. The bear is nervous. The one I love the most is salivating. If you see a big bear there and all of a sudden it starts salivating, what do you think people are thinking? Oh, the bear wants to eat us. No, the bear is terrified of you. It's getting upset and nervous. And so these four are the primary first signs. Whenever you see a bear doing this, you know the bear's getting upset because you're around. All you got to do is back up and get out of there. Now, if you don't back up and get out of there, the bear instead of being upset or nervous, the bear starts to become mad. And so now they're going to send a message saying, all right, you didn't take my huffing or popping seriously. I'm going to send a message and I want you to back up. And so one of the things they might do is a bluff charge. And a bluff charge is usually just a couple of steps in your direction to force you to back up. I promise you it's very effective. The other thing they might do is what we call ground swatting. They might take a log or a bush or even the ground itself and just do this fierce looking display where they swat the ground and they beat up the bush or the log or whatever. And what they're trying to say is, if you don't back up, this is going to be you. And so they're very telltale, showy signs that a bear does not want you around. And the best thing, your reaction to that, the best thing of all, leave the bear alone. Back away, get out of there. He wants you, he or she's telling you, get out of my space. And all you do, you back up slowly. In fact, I'll go over what you're supposed to do and how you're supposed to react. So when you see a bear doing this stuff, you have an opportunity to communicate back to that bear. So what do? Say you're in a defensive situation. You turn the corner and there's a mom with two cubs and you're at close range. And you're like, oh no, what do I do? Obviously, whenever a bear is acting defensively around its cubs, around its food source, you're in its personal space. The thing you don't want to do is you don't want to, excuse me, you don't want to pose as a threat. You don't want to be menacing because they're already afraid. You don't want to kind of go in there and get them to react. So don't pose as a threat. Talk softly, slowly back away. Say, oh, sorry, bear. I didn't mean to intrude. I'm getting out of here. Keep talking to the bear. Now, if the bear starts to come at you, you shout at it to get it to say, whoa, bear, whoa, I'm getting out of here. I'm leaving you alone. You talk firmly. You tell the bear, you want to yell at the bear to get them to stop as you back away. And I'm not going to give percentages, but in almost every situation, that bear is going to let you back up. They want you gone. Now, I will tell you, what I'm about to tell you is going to be different than some people have heard. And I'm going to credit Janelle Sharhag. She's going to be one of the speakers, I don't know, in one of the upcoming webinars. She did some research analyzing bear attacks. And if you read a lot of brochures that you get at national parks or from the State Wildlife Agency, there was a fancy saying which drives me nuts that says, if it's brown, lie down. If it's black, fight back. that is saying brown bears, you do one thing, black bears, you do another. And that's not necessarily the case. In fact, you talk to all the leading bear experts, your reaction should be based on the behavior of the bear, not the species of the bear. And so if you are in a defensive situation, especially if you have a mother with cubs, or you surprise a bear at close range, and that bear suddenly, like, you surprise it at such close range, the bear is on you before you know it. I always strongly encourage everyone to drop down, curl up, because the bear just wants to eliminate the threat. If they think their cubs are threatened, they just want that threat gone. They might bite you, they might scratch you, but as soon as they see the threat is gone, they take their cubs and leave in most situations. Now, I will tell you, if you surprise a bear and it gets on you and it does not stop, you're going to have to fight back eventually. But generally in those surprise initial contacts, you scared that bear and it's trying to eliminate the threat. Again, one of my best friends, Karen Williams, was a hiker in New Mexico. She was a long distance runner and she surprised a mother with cubs, and it was on top of her before she knew it. She read all the brochures. She was fighting back for her life. And the more she fought that mama bear, the more that mama bear fought her. And finally, something in her mind, she heard the cubs in the background. She heard them crying. She rolled over and just shut up. And as soon as she shut up, the bear gave her one or two more bites and got off her, grabbed the cubs and left. Now, again, this is a little bit different than what you hear from state wildlife agencies, but your reaction should be based on behavior, not on species. Okay, let's switch over. That's the defensive situation. That accounts for 90% of the things. You see a mom with cubs or a food source, generally how you encounter a bear. I am going to tell you about these offensive situations, not because I'm trying to scare you, but you need to know what to recognize. They are very, very infrequent, but when they do happen, your reaction needs to be different. So an offensive situation, remember, the bear is trying to close the distance. He doesn't want you to leave. He wants to get closer. In most situations, the bear smells something. He might smell some food in your pack. If you had toothpaste, he might smell something on you that is piquing his curiosity. And so he's trying to get closer. In once in a blue moon, very, very rare situations, the bear can be predatory where they're actually seeking the human as the food source. That rarely ever happens, but when it does, those tend to be the severe attacks, the fatalities. And so in an offensive situation, remember, that bear is trying to get close to you. They're trying to decrease that distance. They want to close that distance and get as close to you as possible. If they're trying to get close to you, do you think they're going to be blustery and trying to scare you? No, they're going to be quiet. They're in stealth mode. They're trying to see if there's a potential food source that they just discovered. And so here's their behaviors. They're going to be totally different. Like I said, in that defensive side of things, they're blustery. They're trying to put on a show and scare you away. On the offensive side, the message they're sending is they're hungry. They smell something they want to get close to. And so they're going to go into this stalking mode where they're kind of secretive. Think of a cat stalking. Now, when you're walking down a trail and you see a bear walking behind you, following you, if you're walking to a water source, it could be the bear's going to the same place you are. Let that, obviously, you got to take notice of that. But if you were to turn and go down a different trail or change your direction and that bear changes their direction and they're constantly pursuing you, then that spidey sense better kick in and the hair better be standing up on the back of your neck. This is where you're going to have to figure out what you're going to do. Another thing you'll see the bears do, they'll keep their head low, kind of swaying back and forth. Again, they're in that predator mode. They also keep their eyes locked on you. They don't want to lose sight of you. And so those kinds of behaviors are the ones you should take note of. Those are offensive bear behaviors. And they're when a bear is acting badly that you got to take note. Now, what is your reaction in this situation where this bear is following you around and trying to get closer to you? In an offensive situation with a black bear, the first thing you do, well, no, you don't want to make a will. The first thing you do is don't pose as a meal. If he's looking for an easy meal, don't give it to him. Let him know that you are not something to be messing with. And so instead of backing away, talking softly, This is where you still have to get yourself out of that position. So you still got to back away. But this is where you're yelling at it. You mean business. You are acting. Your goal here is to act the dominant bear. Let him know, if you come any closer, I'm going to eat you. You're not going to eat me. And so you are yelling with all your might. You could be throwing things. You pick up stuff. You want to scare that bear away. You literally have to play the bigger bear in this predicament. It is hard for me to tell you to do that because your knees will be shaking. But this is the best response when a bear is acting offensively. Obviously, if there's contact in this situation, that bear is looking for food. And you got to send that message right away. There is no curling up or anything. You are fighting back with everything you have to let that bear know that you are not a meal. And so, again, there's two primary situations you'll find yourself in with a bear: a defensive situation or an offensive situation. And so what I want to do now is show you a couple of videos. Let me look at the time. Oh, we're doing good. I'm going to show you a couple of videos that will demonstrate what I just taught you. And then we'll hop back to this real quick. So let me escape from there. And the first thing I'm going to do, remember, most of your bear encounters will be defensive in nature. So let me show you what this jaw popping sounds like and looks like. You might have to turn your volume up as high as possible. It'll be faint, but you'll see here in a bit, he's going to be smacking his lips back and forth together. And I'll be quiet when he does it, so you could possibly hear it. That's the jaw popping. Now watch this. Watch what he does. He's popping his jaws. Did you see him salivate? That is not a sign that the bear wants to eat you. This bear is really, really nervous. Obviously, the person taking this video is right below their tree. This bear is really nervous, popping his jaws. Now let me show you a video of what the huffing looks like. This one, you can see it almost better than you could hear it. But you'll see this bear exhaling so rapidly and so violently, you see his chest going in and out. Right there. You can look up videos of a bear huffing and you'll hear it, but it's that. And when you're close enough to that bear, it's something that you can't mistake. That's him telling you they're nervous. So this video here, I'm going to show you, it's going to be a small black bear. He's going to do everything from, he will pop his jaws, then he'll moan a little bit. If you got to turn up your volume to the maximum, it's very faint. But then at the very end, he's going to huff. He's going to do all three of these. This bear's telling you he's nervous. Now, his actions might not dictate that because he looks calm and not paying attention. But the fact that he's doing these three different behaviors tells you he's nervous. There's the jaw pop. That's the huffing if you heard him walk away. And so he looked pretty calm, but just those signs there is letting you know that that bear is a little bit nervous of your presence. He wants you to leave. You're making him nervous. So, okay. So those are the first signs. Whenever you hear the jaw popping, the huffing, the moaning, if you see actually, let me show you one that I think is awesome. What you're going to see is you're going to see a large black bear do the ground swat, and you will see how effective this is at sending a message that he's agitated. But then I'll let the video play, and you're going to see this really big bear yawn. And again, most people think, oh, isn't that cute? that is a sign the bear is agitated. But watch how effective this ground swat is. See? Now, watch here. He's a good sized bear, but he knows you're there. He already swatted the ground. Watch what he does right here. There's a big old yawn. And so these are just telltale signs. He also has an itch because he's going to scratch himself. But these are telltale signs. He does not want you around. The best thing you can do is just leave him be. He is agitated that you're within his space. And so he's sending you those signals to back up. And I told you about the bluff charge. Here's what a bluff charge looks like. It's not very aggressive. You're going to see jaw popping in here and everything. He's popping his jaws. But the message here, he's not in attack mode. He just wants his space, so that they will come at you for a couple of steps to get you to back up. And so they're very, very intelligent animals telling you when you're in their space. Now, I will tell you, there's a couple of situations that you've got to be careful. Those were all defensive, and the vast majority of your encounters will be defensive encounters. Now, I'm going to show you a couple of videos that are showing offensive behaviors. And again, this is where you react differently. You stand your ground, you scare that bear away. You hear all the kids in the background. Doesn't appear to be a very big bear. There's the school bus, but his behavior was not very good. I would liken this bear to be more inquisitive. He smells something that he's interested in. Obviously, he's probably not interested in eating the person, but he wants to get closer to that person because something's piquing his interest. This is where you are going to be loud and scaring this bear away. This cameraman has it zoomed in. But whenever a bear approaches you like this in this inquisitive nature, this is where you get them to back up. You don't keep letting them get closer and closer. But you see how quiet he is? A bear that is acting offensively is not making a lot of noise. And I can almost guarantee you, had that person yelled at the bear the moment it got down from the tree, the bear would not be coming towards them. So that's bad bear behavior when they're trying to get closer to you. Let's see if I got. Okay, here's another bad behavior. People see this behavior and they think it's cute. And this is where bears are really crossing the line. This is on a hiking trail. And a lot of times people will talk softly to the bear. A bear that's this inquisitive needs some direction. This bear is not long for this world if it keeps up these behaviors. So the best thing for your sake and for the bear's sake is to scare the heck out of this bear so he stops doing this. But these are bad behaviors. Again, I totally understand where people are probably terrified of scaring the bear to attack, but the bear just, you can see how nervous they are, but they're interested. Something's piquing their curiosity. And so if you try to scare these bears are going to run. And then I will show you. So these both, the last video and this video shows a bear that probably smells something that he's interested in. The last video, and again, I don't like showing this because these are rare behaviors. You generally never encounter a bear like this. But they're also the most dangerous, the potential for the most bad to happen. So that's why I'm showing them. But this one is actually one of those predatory situations where the bear was truly interested in the human. So this is way up in Canada. You're going to see a black bear pop out of the bush here. This guy does everything right, I will tell you. He's a good sized bear too.
Whoa!
You can see the guy has a stick in his hand with the shadow, but the bear is continuing to follow him. You got to yell. He's doing everything right. He's got trying to scare the bear away. You got to get to a safe place. But the bear is, see the head down low?
Whoa!
The bear is quiet. He's just sneaking up on the person.
Go away! Go!
You see the head low swaying, but the bear never loses interest in the person. This is probably the most dangerous situation. This is where you got to get to a safe area, but you got to be loud. You got to be mean. You got to let that bear know that you mean business. Again, extremely, extremely rare. You will probably never, ever be in this situation, but if you are, you need to know what to do. So I will tell you, I don't know what happens at the end of this video because they don't show you, but the bear continues the pursuit. So hopefully he made it out okay, simply because we have his video. So anyway, with that, I'm going to try to stop, and let me switch back real quick to this, and I'm going to end my presentation. So you saw the videos. Again, let me stress, the vast majority of your encounters with bears are going to be wonderful. You're going to see a bear off in the distance. You're going to take pictures. Your heart's going to beat. You'll be elated for seeing that bear. If you have an encounter with a bear where you are close enough to get them to react, or they're close enough to get you to react, again, almost every encounter is going to be, it'll be a rush. Don't get me wrong. Your heart's going to be pounding. It'll most likely be a defensive situation where it's a mom with cubs, or you're too close to the bear. They might huff at you. They might pop their jaws. They might even take a step towards you. They're telling you, when you see that, you should actually be a little relaxed, because you know that bear just wants you gone. And so you back up slowly, you talk softly, you get out of the way, you tell all your family and friends about it, and it's a wonderful experience. That will be the vast majority of your bear encounters. If you're ever in a situation where a bear begins to act bad, where it's trying to get closer to you, that's where you act the bigger bear. That's your best reaction to that particular behavior. So with that, I'm going to summarize this and say, bears are wonderful. They're fantastic animals. I spent my career in life working with animals. Love seeing bears every time I go out in the field. Highly intelligent, wonderful animals. They will try to speak to you. They will try to communicate with you to tell you what's going on in their life. All you got to do is listen to them, and you're going to have a wonderful time when you're out in the field. So with that, I'm going to thank you. I will take questions. I got to give photo credits real quick. The other thing I do want to tell everyone is I do have this website. Brian mentioned it to you. It's wildlifeforyou.com. We teach a lot of wildlife classes. We're on Facebook and Twitter. And then one of the things we started doing this year, instead of the webinars, we've been doing podcasts. Myself and one of my co-hosts, Stephanie Payne, who specializes in bear attack response training, we give lots of talks about wildlife, lots of predator type of talks. So if you go to the website, you can learn about that, or Facebook. We always have links there. So anyway, I will leave it here and go to answering whatever questions you may have. So Sandia, if you want to lead the way in that, or Brian, doesn't matter to me.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you so much, Daryl. Really appreciate that. Very informative presentation.
And it was right about an hour. So
Yeah, good job on timing. Yeah, we do have a couple of questions from the chat, and it looks like we also have some in Q&A. And then after that, people will be invited to raise their hands if they want to ask a verbal question. So we had one question that just came in the chat. We'll ask a couple of those first and then go over to the Q&A. Is it ever a good idea to run away? Also, is there any type of spray or deterrent you should carry on hikes for these offensive type situations?
Yes, wonderful question. Let me first start with, is there ever a time to run away? And the answer is no. Whenever you're dealing with a large carnivorous animal, whether or not, I know bears are omnivores, but they do eat meat. And so they will kill animals that are close to them. Or the big worry there is mountain lions. Now, I know the vast majority of people in North America don't live in mountain lion country. Mountain lions are generally found out west. But with mountain lions or cougars and bears, if you surprise one at close range and suddenly you panic and you run, the bad thing with that reaction is it triggers a predatory response in that animal. It literally, their brain kind of gets overridden and their brain says chase. And so if you surprise a bear, and especially a cougar or mountain lion at close range, and you run, they automatically chase you. And so the last thing you want to do is run. You have to stay calm. You have to get yourself out of that situation. You always want to face the animal. Don't walk backwards where you're not seeing where you're going. You can turn around and see where you're going, but don't make sure you don't turn your back on that animal so you can no longer see it. But if you just back away slowly, talk to that animal. If you're in a defensive situation, as soon as that bear sees you increasing that distance, getting away, that's what they want. They want you to leave, and they'll give you that room to get out of there. So there's no need to panic and run. In fact, running is a bad idea. Your second question about the sprays, we teach bear safety classes. There's a number of bear folks that do teach bear safety classes. I always teach in my safety class, the number one thing you carry with you when you're out in the field is not a spray, it's not a gun, it's not bear bells, it's not a knife, it's not any of that, it's your brain. Because your brain is what is going to keep you out of those bad situations. So if you know there's an elk carcass or a deer carcass there that looks like it's been fed on by some kind of predator, you know not to stay in that area. And so your brain keeps you out of those high risk situations. Other than that, though, when you do encounter, you could do everything right and you could still find yourself in a bad situation. You turn a corner and you surprise a mother with cubs, or you encounter a bear that is following you. That is when it comes to what to carry with you, I will always recommend bear spray. Reason being is some people will swear that a gun is better, but a bear spray, when it's used properly at a bear that's coming at you, it releases a cloud of this pepper spray. It's not pepper, it's classified as bear spray. There's a certain chemical, capsaicin, that it releases, and it functions very much like the pepper spray that you know that it gets in your eyes and it irritates you. But just think about everything I just told you about bears and their biology and their sense of smell is just, it's beyond belief. If a bear is coming at you and it goes through this cloud of pepper spray and their nose and that all those olfactory receptors, it is going to blank them out. It is going to freak out that bear because their nose is so sensitive. That bear spray has proven to be so tremendously effective. Yes, you'll hear the rare story of the pepper spray not working for whatever reason or not, but in almost every situation, that bear spray is going to stop a bear and cause it to forget completely about you, because their nose and their eyes just get completely incensed that they forget what they're doing.
So it sounds like, Daryl, that only in offensive situations would a person need to use bear spray. Is that correct?
Yes. In a defensive situation, a bear is generally going to be giving you all the outs. They want you gone, and they let you go. If they do a bluff charge, remember, a bluff charge is not them running 30 yards at you. A bluff charge is them taking a couple of steps towards you just to get you going in the other direction. And it's very effective. I've seen it many times, and it works. And so generally you don't want to use bear spray unless that bear it's like imminent, where it's going to try to make contact with you. And in defensive situations, that's almost always not the case. Offensive situation where a bear is trying to get closer. In fact, a couple of those videos with the offensive, that was perfect for bear spray, because that bear is getting so close that it could potentially reach you in an instant. And if you hit that bear with bear spray, it's going to lose interest in you. And so, yes, offensive is almost every situation where you would use the bear spray with a black bear. Now, again, this talk is all about black bears. When we talk about grizzlies, it's a completely different class. A lot of times grizzlies, being a bigger animal, will come at you, especially if they have cubs, and they push people around more than black bears do. And so you might tend to use bear spray on grizzlies in defensive situations more so than with black bears.
Great, thanks. And we have a couple other questions related to bear spray. Folks are wondering what type or brand they should buy, and fog versus steam.
As far as the brand, I'm not going to recommend one brand. I don't endorse one over the other. The one thing that I will tell everyone is make sure it is labeled as bear spray. Brian, am I correct that the EPA is the one that designates that, or?
Yeah, you should look for EPA certified bear spray.
Yeah, EPA certified. And now there are a couple of major brands. There's Counter Assault, there are UDAP. Those are well known. They're very effective. They've been tested. But bear spray is typically found in an outdoor store. If you go to Walmart and in the aisle that you're checking out, it says pepper spray, that is not bear spray. Bear spray is a big canister. And the reason it's different is not just the concentration, but they're designed to spray greater distances, anywhere from 30 feet to, I think, 50 or 60 feet. And they put out this big cloud. Now, the second part of your question between the steam and the other, I've never heard the different types of projection. Brian, do you have any? Have you ever heard of a different?
No, it's just kind of like a more like a fog, I would say.
And just so you know, we actually had, we belong to this human bear conflict Facebook group, which consists of some of the leading bear experts in North America. And we had a discussion a few weeks ago about where you are aiming. And for the most part, most of the biologists agree. I had training that said otherwise, but most of the bear biologists agree you're aiming low and right in front of that bear. So you want to get as much of that spray in their face as possible, because like I said, their nose is so sensitive. If they inhale and they take in that pepper spray, that bear spray, it's going to short circuit their brain and they're going to forget what they're doing, and they're just going to react and try to get out of that spray.
Gotcha. I misread the
Can
question.
I say one more thing about bear spray? Some people get confused with bear spray, thinking it's kind of like you go camping, you spray it around your campsite so it acts as a deterrent. That is not what it's for. Bear spray is solely to stop an animal from coming at you, from charging. If you spray it around your campsite, obviously you could get some in your own eyes, but when that settles, it does have a peppery type of odor to it, so it can actually serve as an attractant later on after it settles out. So do not spray it around your campsite. Always carry your spray accessible. Don't have it in the bottom of your pack. Have it on your belt or somewhere where you can grab it in a matter of seconds.
So it's not like mosquito spray, it sounds like.
Don't apply it to your arms.
Yeah.
And
the question was actually for a stream, not steam, but a stream. Bear spray as a fog or a stream?
Pretty much all of the bear sprays that I've tried and demonstrated, it's a stream of spray that comes out. It's not like a fogger that just creates a shield in the whole area. It is directed at whatever you're aiming at, and it can spray quite a good distance. And so you want to hit that bear. You don't want to spray it too early. You want to make sure the bear's in range, and the can will tell you the effective range of that particular spray.
Okay.
Yeah, and just quick, another thing we talked about with bear spray on the Human Bear Conflict Facebook page was, if you're mountain biking, keep the can of bear spray on your person as opposed to attached to your bike in case you get separated from your bike.
Nice. How about in your tent at night? Someone else is asking that.
I would keep it in the tent with me. Obviously, do not keep anything aromatic in a tent. A lot of people are very careful with their food and will hang their packs or store their food far away from their tent, but then they'll have blueberry lip balm or something like that. Anything aromatic that you could smell, even the clothes that you cooked in. If you cooked dinner and that smoke got into your clothes, make sure you put a fresh pair of clothes on. You don't want any food smells in your tent. As far as having that bear spray with you, yes, keep that in the tent in case you have a bear. The likelihood of a bear getting into your tent is very small, but you do want to be prepared in case it does happen.
Great. Let's go to some of the other questions here in the chat. Is it wise to not take snacks in my pack on a day hike known to be in bear country?
Now, I hear so many people advise against that. You're probably more at risk of dehydrating or getting, if you get stuck in the backcountry overnight, you might need that food. The likelihood of a bear smelling the granola bar and being inquisitive is very, very low. You need those snacks for your own personal benefit. So I never tell people not to bring food with them because they need the food for themselves. Obviously, put it in zip type bags. Don't, you shouldn't have to worry about that. Bears, the reason bears become a problem in the backcountry is when people will feed them, or those bears get into sloppy campsites where people leave food around. If everyone does what they're supposed to do, bears have no reason to come towards people. If they know that they can't get food from them, there's no reason they hang around. When a bear becomes a problem bear, when they're attracted to people, it's usually a predecessor person that caused that bear to learn that behavior. They either fed it or they kept a sloppy campsite. But I wouldn't worry too much. You need that food. Just make sure you're careful with it. You don't let bears have access to it. You don't want to throw the wrappers or anything on the ground, because that does more problems for the bear than anything else.
Thanks. Brian, do you want to jump in here?
Oh, I was just going to say one thing people shouldn't do is, if they have an encounter with the bear, toss their pack with food in it.
Yeah, someone just wrote that in the chat.
Yeah.
Well, that's very interesting, Brian. Two of my bear heroes, Kim Delosier, who is the head biologist of Great Smoky Mountain National Park for about 30 years, and then Stephen Herrero, who wrote the bear attacks book. He was the guru on bear attacks. Kim and Stephen had quite an argument about what to do if a bear is coming at you. Do you throw your pack? And Stephen was in the camp, well, yeah, if you see a bear coming at you, drop your pack so you can get away. And remember, Kim Delosier was in Great Smoky Mountain National Park, 12 million visitors per year. And he was adamant, do not drop your pack, because with the general public out, if the direction was, if a bear comes towards you, drop your pack, he said there would be millions of packs laying all over the Smokies because people would see a bear and immediately drop their pack. The situation is almost negligible where a bear is really going to get to the point where it's coming after you. Obviously, if a bear is ready to be on top of you, sure, go ahead and drop your pack, but do not drop your pack unless your life is near its end.
Yeah, thanks, Daryl. Well, I think a big reason why so many folks are here tonight is because of the tragic attack that happened in Durango just a few weeks ago. And there are some questions related to that. I'll read a couple of them and feel free to answer, Daryl, whatever you feel most comfortable with. Here's one. The most recent fatal bear attack in Durango. What's your best guess as to why it went south? Did dogs contribute to this adverse encounter? And then another one from Darcy. With the recent bear attack, it seemed cruel to kill the mama bear and her cubs. She was likely only doing her job. Is there any science behind killing them? The likelihood that a bear killed one person would kill another? And how do they know before they kill the bear that it's the right one?
Okay, excellent questions. We kind of anticipated these questions. When it comes to the attack that occurred in Durango, first and foremost, the thoughts go out to the victims, not just the victim and their family, but even the first responders. I have worked with a number of people that have been involved in fatalities from bear attacks, And it is one of the most horrific, horrifying events. So prayers to everyone involved with that situation. In regards to that specific event outside of Durango, not all the information is in. The investigations, believe it or not, do take quite a bit of time. There's forensic evidence that gets looked at. There's a lot of behavioral stuff that gets looked at. And so I can't speak on that particular event as far as what happened. I don't know all the details. I don't even know if anyone knows all the details yet. They're still uncovering some things. So I can't tell you exactly what happened in that specific situation. Now, I will tell you that when it comes to dogs, I teach bear safety classes, and I also hike with my dogs. Lots of people hike with their dogs, and they're a wonderful companion. So I will never tell people not to hike with their dogs, but I tell people when you do hike with your dogs, you got to know what you're getting yourself into, because when you have a bear encounter, if it's just you and the bear, it is already an intense situation. Depending on how that bear's acting, your heart's going to be racing, the bear's nervous. It's a pretty tense situation if you have a close encounter with a bear. You throw a dog into that mix, and you just made a tense situation an insanely tense situation, because that dog in most situations is going to be ramped up. It's going to be barking. It's going to be going at the bear. It's going to be agitating the bear. It makes an already volatile situation even more volatile. You have to know that. You either have to be able to get your dog on leash, or have your dog on leash if you know you're getting close to bear country, or you're in an area where you're likely to encounter a bear. But as far as the Durango, I can't tell you what happened with those dogs. There's still too much information that's unknown for me to comment on that. When it comes to putting the bear down, I deal with this question a lot. In fact, we did a podcast a couple of months ago about why did that bear have to be euthanized? And there's a number of reasons why. Sometimes it is law. I know in New Mexico, any bear that caused human injury or fatality, by law, they had to put it down. It was policy for them to put that bear down. So there's that side of things. Not all states have that. Here's the thing. People are saying bears are just being bears. Absolutely. One of the things you have to understand, there's no data out there that says if a bear attacks someone, it's likely to attack someone again. Because, and this makes so much sense, and we talked about this in that Facebook forum, can you imagine the public's reaction if we were doing a study that says, all right, once a bear attacks someone, we're going to release the bear to see if it attacks someone again? The public just cannot allow that. No, we wouldn't allow it. We are not going to experiment on whether or not bears attack other people once they attack someone. So that's a big thing. But here's where I'm going to go on my little soapbox rant. I was asked to testify in front of the New Mexico legislature. I told you New Mexico, it was a law, and they were going to try to change that law. And they wanted me to testify in front of the New Mexico legislature about whether or not a bear that has attacked someone will attack someone again. And I told them right off the bat, I said, there's no data for me to tell you one way or the other. And they said, we just want your professional opinion. And so here's what I had prepared. And it had nothing to do with bears. It had everything to do with going skydiving. And so if anyone on this talk ever wanted to go skydiving or know someone that was going skydiving, I would imagine the very first time a person attempts to skydive, they're going to be up in that plane, standing in that open doorway, and they are going to be in an utter panic of jumping out of that airplane. And finally, if they jump out of that airplane and the chute opens and they land safely and they're asked to do it again, the next time they're up there, knowing that they've done it once without any repercussions, they're not going to be as afraid. And so my analogy there is, if a bear were to cause serious injury or a fatality on a human, and there's no repercussions, the bear the bear kills someone, the bear injures someone, and then goes about his business, and they just let the bear being a bear. The next time that situation presents itself, in my professional opinion, the bear would not be as afraid that second time around. And once again, I have to tell everyone working for state agencies, for federal agencies, first and foremost, those wildlife agencies protect human life above the animal life. Now they're really big on protecting animals, but a human life is always going to take top billing in any of those situations. So I know it's not what everyone wants to hear, but that's how those agencies functions. They got to protect the public first.
Thanks, Daryl. And I know Brian's got a question for you here.
Yeah, well, as you know, Daryl, our whole thing is to not have people leave food out for bears. So obviously, if bears are finding food in areas with people and homes, that increases the chances of something unfortunate happening, whether that's property damage or livestock loss or worse. Can you talk a little bit about the role of human foods and maybe contributing towards this unfortunate incident?
I think I learned the most from you, Brian, because I wasn't even thinking about that aspect of it. But I heard you talking, or I think you were responding to a specific question. A lot of these towns that are in bear country, whether or not it's Durango or Gatlinburg, Tennessee, or some small town in Idaho, bears are drawn to those human developments because of the ability for them to get into trash or other food items. And so oftentimes bears don't want to be around people. And so bears would be more than happy to be up in the mountains away from people. But it's those food smells and the fact that they're rewarded by getting into trash, it tends to keep bears in those more human developed areas because there's that easy access of food. Now, I don't know exactly, Brian, you know more than I, but I don't know exactly where that particular Durango event occurred. But what you said makes total sense, that those bears, if there wasn't the fact that bears can readily obtain food in those human areas, there's a good chance that mama and her 2 yearlings never would have been in that area. And so that I love that point, in that there's no one, it's not one person to blame, it's all of us to blame. If we're not all doing our part to make sure trash is inaccessible or that other food items are not available to bears, if we don't do our part, we're all to blame.
Very well said, Daryl.
Yeah, thanks so much. That could be a great point to end on here. If we feel complete, there are a couple remaining questions in the Q&A as well. So I'll kind of leave it up to you, Daryl.
Well, one that just came in is, have you had any experience with use of a wrist-mounted stun gun as backup to bear spray?
No, I've had no experience with that. I don't know if I want to have experience with that. Put it this way, if a bear gets through bear spray, you're literally fighting for your life. Whether or not you can get to any other type of weapon to deploy or use, you got to use it. But if I had the choice between grabbing a stun gun or grabbing just a regular gun, I would be grabbing anything I could to get that bear off of me. Again, you're in a fight for your life. If there's contact that's going to occur and he gets through the spray, you got to use whatever you can.
Yeah, and that kind of leads to this next question is, if you don't have bear spray and you're in close quarters with the bear, what is the best way or technique to fight off a bear?
If it's a black bear that is, well, again, remember that defensive situation. I had my good friend Karen Williams. She surprised the mother with cubs, and she was fighting that bear. And as soon as she realized it was a defensive situation, she stopped fighting and the bear left her. But if you're in a situation with a black bear that's offensive, you are poking its eyes, you are doing whatever you can to get that bear to know that you're not going to be an easy meal. And I will tell you, Janelle did that research that showed the more you fight back, the more injured you get. And so let's just hope and pray nobody on this talk will ever get to that encounter. Because again, if you're armed with this information, hopefully your brain will keep you out of those situations you got to be really worried about. And if you notice an offensive situation early on, you can scare that bear away before he ever thinks it's even okay to come that close to you.
Yeah, and I guess that's another good point, is using your brain. Is, you know, if things are looking like it's starting to get serious, use your brain, look for any available weapon, a rock, a stick, your camera, anything that you might need.
Can I tell you a funny story? I sit here and I teach this, what you should and shouldn't do. And I've had tons of experience. And for the most part, most of my, like almost every single experience I've had with a bear, the bears did what I thought they were going to do. The one unknown here is what you are going to do, because I had a situation with a bear coming at me. I didn't have bear spray. I had a shotgun with me. And when this bear was coming at me and he was closing the distance in seconds, the first thing I did is I ejected the first shell. And then I fired twice, missed the bear. I don't know if it's subliminal because I didn't want to hit the bear, but the report of the gun scared the bear away. But your reaction, the way your body reacts in an extremely tense situation, is not always how it seems like you daydream it to go. And so unless, for all the proponents of, oh, I'm going to use a gun instead of bear spray, unless you train routinely, like for a SWAT team where you are in an intense situation where you have seconds to react, you're not going to react how you think you're going to react.
Thanks, Daryl. We have another question about yearlings. Do yearlings tend to exhibit offensive behavior more so than adults? Maybe not knowing any better?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's kind of two answers to that. First off, yeah, yearlings tend to get into more trouble because they just got kicked out of their family group with mom. So they're on their own. They're kind of fighting for themselves. If they're having a hard time finding food, they're going to be the first ones to kind of test the water of trying to find food in a garbage can or somewhere else. They're hurting for food. And so yearlings tend to get in trouble quite a bit. Now, having said that, an adult bear that has had past experience getting food from humans, they're still going to exhibit those bad behaviors. But those teen years, those yearling years where a bear is just on its own, those tend to be the bears that kind of push the limits as to what they can and can't do. And so that's why it's really important, if you're hiking and you see a young bear that is being inquisitive and coming closer, you can do that bear wonders by scaring the crap out of it. I'm on Facebook quite a bit, and I see all these videos of these young bears, or even a female bear with their cubs coming up on porches, getting into swimming pools, and everyone's all, oh, isn't that so cute? And I'm sitting here almost in tears because I know those bears are not going to last. They're going to get killed. They're going to get hit by cars, run over. They're going to get shot. And it drives me nuts because those behaviors are bad for the bears. And it's so simple for us to fix. If we wouldn't tolerate it, yes, go ahead, take a picture. But as soon as you're done taking a picture, grab 2 pots and pans and scare the crap out of that bear if you care about that bear.
Yeah, that's been a real tough message to get across to people, especially people that enjoy seeing bears, is maybe it'd be best if we just ran bears off. And somebody asked, basically, how about using an air horn to scare off a bear?
Yeah, those work well, especially if a bear has no experience with it. But if everyone starts carrying air horns, that there's a term called habituation, and a lot of people think habituation is just about bear being used to being fed by humans. Habituation is, it's habit forming, and so that's the root word, is habit. And so habituation, if everyone's using an air horn, like in a particular neighborhood, and if the bear is still getting a reward and getting in the trash and you're blowing your air horn, they'll soon realize that the horn is just an aggravation. I'm still going to get food. Obviously, the key thing in all these situations is make sure that bear cannot get access to food. But then if you scare the bear away with an air horn, hopefully he'll leave that thing alone. But as long as there's a food reward, they are going to look the other way, especially if there's no negative stimulus. Now, having said that, Brian, you set up electric fences. Something that hurts a bear is generally much more effective than if it just scares a bear.
Yep. And got two questions here. One is basically asking, is human urine a deterrent or attractant to bears? And then the second one is, how about loudly vocalizing when you're out hiking?
Human urine, I don't think it causes bears to run the other way. Again, their sense of smell is just beyond belief. So with as many people peeing in the woods when they're on a hike, they've probably smelled it. The thing with urine, it doesn't matter if it's human, deer, bear, whatever. After a while, urine tends to break down into ammonia, so it kind of all smells the same. So I don't think urine serves as an attractant or a deterrent. It's probably just a smell that they're used to. As far as vocalization, that's actually a great question, because one of the best things to do when you are hiking, don't hike alone. If you have a buddy or a couple of folks that you like to hike with, when you're out hiking, just talk to each other. Because the last thing you want to do is accidentally surprise a bear. And if you're talking, you're going to be making commotion. You'll be laughing, giggling. A bear is going to hear you, and they're going to steer clear. All animals, whether or not it's a bear or cougar or anything, they will steer clear of you if they don't want to be around humans. And so talking is just one of the best things. If you're afraid of bears or having a bear encounter, go hiking with someone else and just have a conversation as you're hiking. And the likelihood of you running into or surprising a bear is going to be really, really low.
Nice. Well, I'm definitely getting some takeaways from this presentation. I'm hearing to keep trash secure, keep livestock feed, any like other food sources secure to minimize those bear attractants, hike with other people, talk to them at a normal voice, carry bear spray on our bodies. What are some of the other key takeaways, Daryl, that you really want to just make it come home to everybody right at the end of our presentation here?
The key takeaway, folks, I can't stress enough. The bears are awesome creatures. You need not be afraid of them, but you need to respect them. And I will tell you, the more you're around bears, the more you see bears, the more you can understand and read these behaviors that I taught you, and the more comfortable you'll be. With my wildlife talks that I give, I always say, knowledge is not only power, it's confidence. And so if there's folks out there that are really afraid of having a bear encounter, I tell you what, when I was 18 years old, 16 years old, and just going out there, I was afraid to run into a bear. But the more you learn about them, the more you understand them, the more confident you become. And it's actually exciting, especially if you see a bear well in advance. You can sit there, observe the bear. You can have the time of your life. And if you do have those rare encounters, whether or not it's defensive and the super rare offensive, and you deal with it, you come back with a story you're just dying to tell everyone. It's just so exciting to be living and hiking and recreating in bear country. So don't be afraid, be smart, be knowledgeable, and just have fun out there and just respect those bears.
Well, let's give it up for Daryl. Thank you so much for such an informative presentation. We really, really appreciate it. We encourage everybody to make sure you register for the future webinar series. Our next one is happening on June 3rd and then June 10th, 16th, and 23rd. You can register on the Bear Smart website. We really appreciate you all. We will be posting the recording to this on the Bear Smart website, and we'll also ask Daryl if he feels comfortable with that being shared on Facebook and other social media. So
Absolutely.
thank you, everyone. Hope you have a great evening and stay safe out there.
Thanks,
Thanks,
everyone.
Daryl. Thanks, Sandia. That was great.
I'll just do a quick screen share on our last slide here, just to remind folks